Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're diving into the latest from North Bay Resources, especially if, gold mining is something you follow.
Sure, sure.
We've got their September 25th news release, and we're going to break it all down. What's the big takeaway here?
Well, the Bishop Mill is finally operational. This is a big deal for North Bay. It means they're transitioning from just exploring for gold to actually pouring it. It's a big step.
Okay, so let's unpack that a bit. This is a company that was really mostly drilling holes just a few months ago, right?
Yeah, and that's a good way to think about it. It's like spending years planning and building this car factory, and then finally getting to flip the switch and seeing that first car roll off the production line. That's where North Bay is now, and it really de-risks the whole operation. It shows investors that they can actually produce gold.
And they're not wasting any time either. They're already pulling gold out of the ground at their Fran Gold project, and they're turning it into these door bars. What exactly are door bars? It sounds like something out of like an Indiana Jones movie.
It does have a certain kind of adventurous ring to it, doesn't it? Door bars are essentially the first tangible product of a gold mine. Think of it like a brick of almost pure gold and silver. They get refined further later on. But those door bars really represent that the whole operation works, from digging up the ore to actually pouring those bars.
And we're not just talking about any gold here. This is high-grade stuff. The release mentions 1.2 to 2.3 ounces of gold per ton of ore.
Wow.
To put that in perspective, how does that stack up against other gold mines?
That's some seriously impressive ore grade.
Yeah.
I mean, many large-scale gold mines operate with ore grades of less than a tenth of an ounce per ton. So 1.2 to 2.3 ounces, that's a significant find. And they've already identified thousands of tons of this high-grade ore. This whole initial phase is all about fine-tuning, making sure they're squeezing every ounce of gold out of that rock.
They're basically calibrating a money-making machine. This has got to be so exciting for North Bay.
Absolutely. And this is where it gets even more interesting from a technical standpoint. They're talking about jaw crushers and ball mills, gravity separation, and this process called flotation. Have you ever wondered how they actually separate the gold from the rest of the rock?
It does sound kind of like a giant high-stakes washing machine.
It does, doesn't it?
So walk us through it. How do they go from, crushed rock to those solid gold bars?
Well, imagine you've got this bucket full of sand, and you want to pick out all the tiny gold flakes. Gravity separation is kind of the first step. They use water and the weight difference to let the heavier gold settle at the bottom while the lighter rock gets washed away. But that doesn't get everything.
Yeah.
That's where this flotation process comes in.
Okay, yeah, this is where it gets really interesting. Flotation sounds like it's straight out of like a science fiction movie.
It is pretty ingenious, actually. They grind the remaining ore into this fine powder and mix it with water, and then they inject air bubbles.
Okay.
And here's the magic trick. They add these chemicals that make the tiny gold particles cling to those air bubbles.
Oh, wow.
And then all those bubbles rise to the top, carrying the gold with them, while the waste rock just stays at the bottom. It's basically like giving the gold little life jackets.
So they skim off all that bubbly gold and boom, you got door bars.
Exactly. It's such a clever way to separate out even the tiniest little particles of gold. And the fact that North Bay is doing all of this on-site at the Bishop Mill, that's a huge plus for their efficiency and their bottom line.
Speaking of, doing things well, the news release also mentioned some big names joining North Bay's team, the Sabian Group.
Yeah.
For those of us who don't work in like the media world, why does that name make you go, aha?
Tim Sabian is like a legend. He built brands and crafted narratives that captivated entire industries. And this isn't just about like slapping a logo on a billboard. This is about controlling the message, building trust, attracting investors.
Yeah.
And Gil Edwards, with all his digital expertise, they're not just digging for gold. They're digging into the future of communication.
So it's not just about the gold they pull out of the ground. It's about how they tell that story to the rest of the world.
You got it. But, let's not forget about North Bay's other projects. They're not putting all their eggs in one basket with this. This news release also dives into the Mount Vernon and Tabor gold mines, and this is where we see their, long-term strategy really taking shape.
Right. The Mount Vernon project sounds really interesting. They're planning to take this massive 500-ton bulk sample of high-grade ore. What is the big deal about a bulk sample?
Think of it like taking a car for a test drive. but on a much larger and way more expensive scale.
Sure.
They're pulling out a huge GE chunk of ore, running it through all sorts of tests and analyzing, the heck out of it. And this gives them some really crucial data on the quality, the consistency, the overall potential of that entire ore body.
So it's like a sneak peek to help them decide if it's worth investing in the entire mine.
Exactly. And that data they get from this bulk sample that's going to be really valuable in planning, the most efficient and profitable way to extract that gold IF. They decide to move forward with it. They're being really strategic about this. They're not just digging holes and hoping for the best.
And then there's the Tabor gold mine, specifically the Wild Boar Zone. What's the story there? That name almost sounds mythical.
It does, doesn't it? What's really cool here is that the Wild Boar Zone already has a history. It was mined in the past. So that tells us right away, there's gold there. But what North Bay is likely going to do is leverage all this modern technology and techniques to get to and extract that gold more efficiently and more profitably than was ever possible, back in the day.
So they're breathing new life into this old mine. It's like a treasure hunt where they already have part of the map.
And like any good treasure hunt, there's going to be challenges along the way.
Which brings us to the environmental aspect. Mining, especially gold mining, it's got a reputation for being, well, pretty tough on the environment. What stood out to you in the release about their approach to responsible mining? They mention working with firms like Newfields and SRK Consulting. What can you tell us about them?
Yeah, those are big names, especially when it comes to like the environmental consulting world, particularly around mining. Newfields, they're known for their expertise in water management. That's a really crucial part of minimizing the impact of mining operations on local water resources.
Right.
And SRK Consulting, they're like the all-star team of mining and environmental consultants. They assess everything, the stability of tailings dams, the potential for acid mine drainage, you name it.
Wow.
So, North Bay bringing these guys on board, it really shows they're serious about doing things the right way.
It sounds like they're ticking all the boxes here. They've got a producing mill, these promising projects, a really experienced team, that savvy media strategy, and like you said, a real commitment to doing this responsibly. But there's always a catch, right? What are some of the challenges that North Bay might face moving forward?
Well, yeah, that is the million-dollar question. I think one thing that really jumped out at me was them mentioning transportation costs. The Fran Gold project is in a pretty remote location.
Right.
And getting all that ore from the mine site to the Bishop Mill could get expensive, especially if they have to rely on trucking it all.
Yeah, it's not like they can just order an Uber for like a few tons of gold.
Not yet, at least.
Yeah.
Although that would be pretty amazing, wouldn't it?
It would.
But they did mention, potentially exploring rail options, which could be a real game changer. Rail is usually, way more cost efficient, and it's got a much lower carbon footprint compared to trucking, all that stuff, especially over, long distances. So that's definitely something to keep an eye on.
So for someone like me who's just, starting to learn about gold mining and North Bay resources, what's the key takeaway from all this?
It's an exciting time for North Bay. They're going from this exploration company to an actual gold producer, and they're doing it strategically. They've got a producing mill, they've got multiple projects, and they've got a great team. They're not just digging for gold, they're digging into innovative technology, smart communication, and environmental responsibility.
This has been fascinating. It really makes you realize that gold mining, it's not just about digging up treasure, right? It's about science and strategy and sustainability and even storytelling.
Absolutely. And that's what's so cool about, these deep dives we do. It sparks more questions and encourages more research and ultimately helps you form your own informed opinions.
Well said. If you're intrigued by, gold mining at all, North Bay Resources is a company to watch. Do your own research, follow their progress, and see what happens. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into North Bay Resources.